Alright, it is December 9th, 2018, and this is our oral history project with Mr. James Schmitt. Alright, so let's just get started. So you grew up in River West. What was it like growing up there? What was the community like?
Typical Milwaukee, I think immigrants very much Polish and German, which I come from. My stock, my dad's German, my mother was Polish. So it was a time that you really were centered around your parish. A lot of bars in the area, so your social outlet was after Mass. Everybody went to bars. Not too far from our house, matter of fact, on all four corners were bars. And it was kind of the social aspect, they'd have those. You ever played that game where on sawdust you throw that, it's like a bowling kind of thing? So, nickel beers. This was the late 40s, early 50s kind of thing. So it was kind of a slow-moving time, very parish-oriented. The church was important, and it was very much, like I said, a Polish-German neighborhood.
So you didn't live there for very long. You only lived there till you were 5 years old, correct?
Yes.
And then you moved to 79th in Lisbon.
Yes.
Was there anything unique about that area?
Well, yeah, it was like going to the other part of the world. I mean, you had the downtown area and the River West. It's called River West now. And 79th and Lisbon was kind of the far western part of Milwaukee. This was 1953. So, you know what pallets are? So we didn't have any even sidewalks or really lawns, and so you walked on pallets to get to your house. So it was kind of the end of Milwaukee. So it was a new area to something like end of Brookfield today, for example. Again, that was kind of a different move for us. It was a different neighborhood and not as Polish and German as the other neighborhoods. So it was a newer neighborhood, but we got acclimated there pretty fast. And I was the oldest of 4 children there, so we lived there till the 90s.
Did all your you had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister?
Mm-hmm.
Did that affect your growing up at all? How did that did that affect you and how you interacted in Milwaukee at all? Did you hang out with them or do anything with them? Well,
we had quite a gap. I mean, my sister was only 3 years younger than I am. My 2 brothers were 9 and 10 years younger than me, so almost like a couple different families. So the 3 of us boys lived upstairs. We had a dormer house, and so those days didn't even think about it, but I don't know how many people have 3 boys live in a small room, and we had the other part of the upstairs was unfinished. My sister lived downstairs, and then my parents lived right across the hall from her. And it was a relatively small house, 1 bathroom and stuff. And we became active. The parish again was important. Mother of Good Counsel is where I went to grade school. But then I was in college, and my brothers were in grade school. So it was kind of they kind of grew up together, and I kind of left when they were coming to their formative years. And I was as being the oldest. Of course, everyone knows the oldest is the wisest and smartest and best looking, and that was me, of course. But I got along with my siblings well. We got along very well. Unfortunately, when my brothers passed away a couple of years ago, but we got along pretty well. But I was gone a lot because I went to school and I started teaching at Marquette High and stuff like that, and they were kind of still growing up.
So you attended Mother Good Counsel. You went to church there and you went to school there.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you had to merge with a couple of different schools because your class wasn't big enough. What was that like?
Well, the 60s was the heyday of Catholic education in Milwaukee. I was part of the baby boomers. All of our boys came home after World War II, including my father, and a lot of children being born, and a lot of schools cropping up, and Catholic education was real big, like I said. I mean, Pius was the largest school, I think, in the state of Wisconsin at the time. There were 2,000 kids in Pius in the 60s. And Mother Good Counsel, there were 2 other parishes that had started up relatively close to us. Margaret Mary, which some people realize on 92nd and Capitol, and Lady Lourdes was like on 63rd, just off Capitol. And both of those entities had churches, but they didn't have schools. So can you imagine my graduating class in 1961 at Mother of Good Counsel, we had 192 students, 192 in 8th grade. And like I said, that was the heyday of Catholic education. There were big schools, and religion was really a kind of a priority. And kind of has dwindled as time has gone on. But Mother Good Counsel is still there, 68th and Burleigh, Lisbon. But now the only reason it exists is it's kind of a charter school, and it takes other students in. So they don't have enough in the neighborhood to support it anymore. Like a lot of Catholic schools have merged, for example. But that was a unique experience. As a matter of fact, there was kind of dorms. We had dorms in grade school across the street because there were too many kids to come in the whole school. So like 6th grade, we were in the dorm, and people in history remember another Catholic high school star was called Francis Jordan. It's right across the street from Mother of Good Counsel. It lasted, from the late 60s into it only lasted about 5 or 6 years. But there's so many Catholic schools and big rivalries and big schools. Pius was always a big rival at that time. And Don Bosco was a boys' school. St. John Cathedral, so there were Mesmer. There were a lot of schools.
You talked about like how important like the church was and how like connected like people were through the church. Was your family like really involved in the church? Like, did you know the church community pretty well?
Yeah, I think the Polish, German neighborhoods. And when immigrants come into this country, even now. Okay, the German and Polish were the immigrants in the 40s and 50s, and going back in the history that you're studying in your class, and people tend to cleave around their church and their parish and their neighborhoods. Neighborhoods were really true neighborhoods in those days, and even into the 60s, and even into the 70s. The parish was kind of the neighborhood was kind of your core group. People didn't travel as much. It wasn't, there were cars, of course. We're not that old, but the emphasis is really, for example, growing up, my dad's sister lived a couple blocks away, his other sister lived here, and you just had, Grandma and Grandpa a lot of times lived with the parents. You had a lot of that you don't see today. There's still a lot of good neighborhoods. You study in Milwaukee, the different neighborhoods that there are, but the Italian neighborhood was big, and so everybody kind of had their areas, and the church was kind of a focal point of that. Yeah.
So, do you think, like, opposed to now, where you kind of said that neighborhoods don't like interact as much as they used to in your neighborhood, was it kind of like you could just like walk, you could like go up to your neighbor's house and you could like walk in or something?
Yeah, you really could. My growing up is really a different era. When I went to Marquette High, I hitchhiked home. And we never even worried about that kind of stuff. Now, this was the 60s again, okay? But we had a lot of fun because one guy would go out on 35th in Wisconsin. I lived on 79th in Lisbon, so northwest side. So one guy would get his thumb and stick it out there, and someone would stop, and about 4 more guys would run, and we all run into the car and stuff like this. I never had a problem getting home. Usually I had 2 rides. I went west, then I had to go north. There are a lot of people, our transportation was hitchhiking. Now, does anybody hitchhike today? Neighbors lock their doors. Although I'll say there's a rejuvenation. I live in Wauwatosa now. I'm a long time, about 40 years with my family and our 4 children. And there are a lot of neighborhood associations in Wauwatosa, so that kind of idea seems to be coming back. A lot of neighborhood associations in your communities, which I think is a good thing.
So in your neighborhood, did you like have a group of friends you would like always hang out with? And did you have like a spot in Milwaukee that stood out to you, maybe like a hot spot that you would go to like hang out that you remember?
Yeah, a couple hot spots. There are still Gillies today. A hot spot for us was Gillies, especially the high school. Pius is just down the block from Gillies, going south. And our big rivals, well, Don Bosco was big, but the biggest was Pius. because there was Pius Grade School, wasn't too far from Mother Good Counsel Grade School. A lot of people went to both schools, and so there was a natural rivalry there, and there would be hundreds of students at Gillies after a game. And there might have been little scuffles once in a while between Marquette High and Pius students. So that was a real hang. And then, you know, we, in summer, I mean, we had all these outdoor activities all the time. Some Pius guys, and I got to know Marquette guys or guys from the neighborhood, so grade school, and then it became high school. Baseball was really big. We loved to play baseball. So a lot of guys would come to my house on 79th Elizabeth, and we'd bike. I mean, we biked everywhere. Okay, if we didn't hitchhike, we were biking. And we went down the 24th and Burleigh. It was Chambers Field. There's field still in that area, and we go play baseball there. And there was we were in a couple leagues, and it was racially mixed because that was a different area. It became more African American area. Then Polish and German started moving out, and Italian stayed on kind of the east side. And, you know, the makeup of Milwaukee today. So that kind of started in the 60s and 70s more so. And so, yeah, I had a lot of good friends, and we loved to play baseball as much as we could.
So you said you were big rivals with like Pius and Don Bosco.
Yeah.
So you played baseball for Marquette?
I tried to do a lot of things, but I didn't do it very successfully. I got cut from all the sports I think I went out for. So I played freshman and sophomore basketball. Got cut when I went out for varsity. Got cut when I went out for baseball. Of course, I was working too. Baseball was in the summer, and I worked. I've always worked, and so I couldn't really make the team anyway. But I had a lot of friends who played on the team. But I would say this, and I think Spirit's pretty good today. What I see. I was just at a Marquette, Wisconsin game last night. Of course, that's college now. But my wife's a Marquette University grad. And I went to Medicine for grad school back in 70, 71. And so I kind of cheer, but we've been season ticket holders when I got married to my wife right away, right after she got a Marquette. So we've been season ticket holders for 45 years for Marquette University. And Wisconsin's their big rival. I mean, it was electric yesterday. It was a lot of fun. It reminded me of the days in high school basketball. I mean, we had some tremendous teams early on when I started Marquette High in 71, 72. So I was here for almost 30 years. But it was terrific sports rivalries. And I remember in high school, I remember in college, I was always a big sports fan. And we had just terrific organized. I was a cheerleader when I was in Marquette High, and I was at college and this kind of stuff too. But I was always, and we had a lot of clean, good fun. I mean, we'd travel. I mean, even the city for high school games. But I remember college at St. Thomas, or I was in St. Paul, Minnesota. We'd go all the away games, and we were just really good student spirit backers, and that was a lot of fun. And I've enjoyed following sports since then too. Sports has always been a big thing in my life.
So obviously you're a Marquette grad. Were there any like noteworthy events that could like sort of illustrate how your experience of going here might be different than ours?
I don't know if it was a different time. In the 60s were very tumultuous, I think is the right word. So in high school and going to college. I think the most traumatic event I can remember the 60s by far, of course, 68 when Martin Luther King got assassinated and Bobby Kennedy got assassinated. But John F. Kennedy was killed in 1963. I was a junior in high school at Marquette High. I remember being in the classroom and announced that this happened. And it was just like a bomb had dropped. I mean, it was really taken very hard. Kennedy was the first and only in history of the U.S. presidency Catholic president. There was all sorts of, you talk about prejudices and stuff like that. When Kennedy was ready to say, well, he's going to, the Pope's going to run the, I mean, it was ridiculous. But this is how, this is why we have good education. You get rid of prejudices, and you don't put everybody in every race and every nationality, et cetera, and oh, these are people, you know what I'm talking about. Marquette High was, the Jesuits are the backbone of Marquette High. I mean, they're just a terrific teaching branch and terrific men. And then I think people, when I was here, You know, more and more as time has gone, more and more lay, less and less Jesuit. You can see the percentage, you know, decade by decade. So now there's just a handful of Jesuits. But the Jesuit tradition remains because the laymen who come in, you know, really follow Jesuit tradition too. You know, in higher education, the importance of what curus personalis, right? The whole man. I don't think we talked about that as much in the 60s, but that was really there. Market High has always been an excellent place. I mean, I don't know if any place is perfect for everybody, but we had a retreat program, but I think the difference is you have such, you know, really broad experience here, you know, a broader retreat experience. You know, the media, there's just so much more out there, and social media we never had, and that kind of stuff. It's just a different world, kind of. And but the education remains the same. So, I mean, I'm very prejudiced as far as, I think Market High is just an excellent institution, and I think it's been proven. You know, I look at friendships, people I know, maybe when you guys go off to college, and maybe your best friends, and when you graduate from college, just to be Market High guys. I know for myself it is. I still got good friends from 1965 from Market High. John Gerda is one who, you know, the making of Milwaukee, a terrific guy. And I kept a lot of college friends too. So I mean, this is part of education too. And I think we had Jug. I guess you have Jug, right? Justice under God. Well, that was, and we used to have with the stick and get hit with the stick and stuff like this. That's changed a lot. Before you could just intimidate and say, "Come over here, Buster. You know, give me 5, you know," and get whacked on the old butt, you know. You know, now you look at people wrong, and you know, your parents will be saying, "You can't even talk to roughly to my child." And you know what? There's a nice in between here. I think discipline is very important. I think that no one's really scarred by that, you know. And you can be too lax too, you know. But that's changed a little bit too. I'm not sure for the better. I think parents, I mean, my dad would pull me by the collar and take me to a teacher. Said, "He does anything wrong, you just take care of him," you know. Now I think parents come in and say, "No, you be nice to my little Johnny. You know, he has a fragile ego, so make sure you take care of him." There's something to that. But so I think that's a change. I think, I mean, you can decide for yourself on that. I think, see Market High, the private schools can be more disciplinary, shall we say. The public school have a lot more, I think, difficulties to work with. And I think a major difference was, or the similarities are that I think here the parents are always involved. It makes a big difference in someone's education. I mean, you don't have parental support. I mean, how do 13-year-old kids, boys or girls, figure out, you know, what's going on unless they have some real parental support and some real guidance and moral guidance that you get in a high school. So there's a lot of similarities too. The eras are very different.
You said that when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, it felt like a bomb had dropped almost. Do you remember, like in detail more, like what you were doing here? Like, do you remember when it happened? You know
what? I think if you talk to anybody of my era, and they will know exactly what they were doing when Kennedy was assassinated, especially Catholics. And I mean, this was a different era too, and they talked about, you know, after World War II was, I mean, World War II and afterwards was very different. And Kennedy brought in new optimism. He was young, good looking. He had a philosophy about going out, kind of, you know, using your talents for others. You know, with the Peace Corps started really with Kennedy and reaching out. And so he was a very dynamic leader. You know, he had his faults, like all of us do, huh? But when that happened, it was just like, wow, we just entered a new era, you know, a fresh, exciting, energetic, you know, more outgoing, and he was dead. Yeah, I remember in the English class, Father Forey was teaching. He was very sad, and he said, "I have some very bad news." And then I remember it was like a 2-day event, and he had Lyndon Johnson in the plane afterwards, and he had all, you know, following Lee Harvey Oswald and trying to find who this guy was. And then you had the funeral and little John saluting the casket. And I was in my robe for about 2 days. I don't know if I went to bed. You know, the TV didn't go all night, but I guess I did sleep. But I was really mesmerized by that, and I think a lot of people were. And I think that started my interest in politics, really, too. I mean, I was in student conclave here. senior class president, and I went to college and I was senior class president there, and I just got involved, and then I was here for 30 years, and all of a sudden I ran for political office. I've been a county supervisor for 20 years almost now. So I guess the politics, I would say it really started with Kennedy, and I just awe of that, and say, you know, I kind of like to be like that.
So you said you were president of Conclave here?
I was president of senior class. I wasn't president of Conclave. But,
okay.
And when I was, a lot of years when I was teaching here, I was a moderator of Conclave too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, has Conclave changed here at all?
Well, I'm not.
What's Conclave like?
Well, Conclave, I wouldn't think very dissimilar to what it is now. I mean, we try to, we get together in the summer, and we make a calendar for the whole school year. I mean, a lot of dates were done already, but, you know, when is homecoming going to be? You know, when are we going to have some dances? When are we going to have some assemblies? Excuse me, you know, what is kind of our theme or goal for the year? You know, and I don't know if Conclave is considered as, I don't know, prestigious is the right word, or very active. We were a very active kind of group, and really in the lifeblood of the school, and the same thing in college too.
So you're the Milwaukee County Supervisor now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Marquette, like, helped your interest in politics at all? Like, it helped fuel that?
Yeah, I think it did. I guess it was an outlet where I could, my personality was very outgoing, and I guess I like leading things, and I just, you know, I wasn't the best. I wasn't an A+ student. I wasn't very good with mechanics or robotics as we have today. I wouldn't have been involved with that, or physics, or these kind of things. And so this was a good outlet. It was right for my personality. I could really delve into that. So.
During, like, the summers and stuff, you said you worked at Pabst.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like, being like a iconic Milwaukee?
Yeah, I mean, when I was, you know, your age and going into the 70s, I mean, Milwaukee was the beer capital of the world. And we had Schlitz, Pabst, Miller, Gettleman. I mean, it really was the beer capital of the world. It still has a lot going on here. Miller's, Coors now and together, and Pabst is still coming back. But the breweries were probably at that time the biggest employers of the city. And so there was just a lot going on. You know, Miller Valley, where it is today, you had, and Pabst down on Market Street, and, you know, Broadway, you know, lower downtown. And Schlitz was right up the block there, really, too. And so they were a big employer, and it was a beer city. And so I didn't actually work in the brewery. I worked a number of, in high school and college, I always worked summers in one of the breweries. It was Pabst. I was in merchandising department. I kind of worked in the offices. So I wasn't, or merchandising, I was pounding shadow boxes you put up in taverns. They don't do that anymore, I guess. But, and then I worked at Continental Can also. We had a couple big can companies up until the 90s. And so even when I was teaching, I'd work some summers like at Continental Can. Those were the old days too, I tell you. You know, Milwaukee, besides the breweries, manufacturing, A.O. Schmitt, A.O. Smith, Harnisch-Fager. I mean, we were, in the Midwest has always been kind of the industrial part of the country, and we had a lot of jobs, a lot of factory jobs, and you didn't need college educations in those jobs. And then when those, but I tell you, everybody should work in the factory or one of these places, and then you'll appreciate your education. Because that opened my eyes. I mean, the guys were making pretty good money at those times. You know, you're making pretty good money. You didn't have to have a college education. And so there's temptation, a lot of guys then just stayed and worked there. But it sure wasn't using your mind for the most part, these factory jobs and foundry jobs, which we had a lot of in Milwaukee. And still, I mean, John Gerda was talking the other day, and he said we used to be, in the 50s, 42% of our jobs were industrial jobs, these factory jobs. Now it's like 18%. I mean, that's changed because more tech, you know, social media and that stuff, as you well know, technology, which you got to have these days. We didn't have to worry about that before. So they were eye-opening jobs, and they were, Milwaukee, the blue collar, kind of reputation, and it was blue collar in those days, and that has changed over time. But it was a good awakening to say, maybe I better stay in school and get a good education. I don't want to be working on pallets or on a machine, and these things come boom, 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 they come down and stuff. And I think I want to do more than that in my life than do that, even though you can make pretty good money, Ed.
So you said that you worked at Pabst, and you obviously knew a lot about like the factory jobs. Did you ever like witness any strikes? Because I know there's a lot of like workers' rights activists going on that.
Yeah, there was certainly more. Striking wasn't necessarily a dirty word. Unions were much stronger than they are today. Okay, but if you study the history of Milwaukee, or you study the history of unions, you go back to the 30s, Taft-Hartley, and there's been it's like the stock market, kind of ebb and flow for union participation. And the unions were very strong in the 60s. My father was a labor leader, so he worked in the Brewery Workers Local Number 9 union there, and did things like, you see today's your union, you get two guys on a truck, so you have two jobs instead of one job, okay? And there were quite a few strikes periodically in the breweries, particularly in some of these other places we were talking about, and unions had a lot of power. They said, you fire this guy, I'm shutting down this line. Well, you can't. Yeah, I will shut down the line. Well, and then you can't talk like that anymore. Of course, Act 10 stuff, what previous Governor Walker did, took more power away from unions. And good and bad. You read Upton Sinclair, okay, the jungle, and what things in the slaughterhouses were even in the early 1900s. So I would say that unions have an important role in the economics of our history. In the city of Milwaukee, they were very big, kind of working with the socialists, that era of the 20s and 30s, and even going up to 1960, up to Henry Meyer. I mean, we had, the socialist mayors, and there was kind of commonality then, and people worked together, and unions were accepted. And, hopefully we get closer to the day you don't need unions if people are treated correctly, but you got to thank the unions for like pensions, workman's compensation, the 8-hour workday, this kind of stuff, child labor laws. Unions were all involved in that. So we can, a lot of people don't like unions. A lot of businesses don't like unions, obviously, because they say, well, you protect people that shouldn't be protected, So the pros and cons and everything, ups and downs through history, but I think unions have played an important role. I think they're playing too less of a role now, and so maybe we'll see that come back a little bit. It'd be a nice world to have where people don't need unions, but there's always somebody scamming, and taking advantage of people. Hopefully we got some nice relationships with like Northwestern Mutual, for example. I mean, they give their employees free lunch. I mean, they're really good with their benefits, and you don't need a union now when you got good corporate, working together, which that's what it should be.
So your dad was the leader of a union. So did he like influence you at all to get like, obviously you're getting involved in like the political arena now. Do you think he influenced you to take that path?
Yeah. I mean, I have a picture talking about a strike. So there was the Kohler, you still hear a Kohler company? Kohler was very big, for a long time. So this is in the 50s, and I'm in kind of a deerskin kind of outfit, a jacket or something like that. My dad took me along to Kohler. They were striking Kohler, so I was on the striking line, and I was a 6-year-old kid or something like this, or 10-year-old. I don't remember. I remember the picture though, and so I had two brothers, like I said, and a sister. My one brother is a union guy, so he certainly was influenced by my father. He's a local labor leader too. I didn't go into that, but I'm sure that he was around. He had pictures in his office of Hubert Humphrey. He was, presidential candidate. He was senator from Minnesota. Gaylord Nelson was a governor in Wisconsin, very known for his environmental stuff. My dad worked on those campaigns and knew those people. And so, yeah, politics around, so consciously and kind of subconsciously, I thought politics was always kind of in the back of my mind, I think, yeah.
So you said that when you were like 6, you said that you with your dad, and you were with him while he was like fighting for the union.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember like what just like the general vibe of that was? Was it like just like peaceful? They were just like protesting, or?
I'd be pretty hazy, but I know the Kohler strike was a pretty bitter one. I think it went on for over a year, might have been even closer to 2 years, and there was a little bitterness there between the parties, and you know, you'd have sometimes they get replacement workers to come in, and you know, people be yelling, you know, yelling at them, or maybe throwing some stuff. These people were going to take their jobs away and stuff like that. But for the most part, we've had. My memory was that, you know, pretty calm, and the police would have you, you know, you couldn't be right next to the place and this kind of stuff. Although, I remember the race riots. We had significant race riots in Milwaukee in 1967. And I was, somewhere I was working, and the whole city got shut down. You've maybe studied Jim Groppe and, you know, the Black Panthers, right? So there was a lot of that. Milwaukee was, you know, a segregated city, I'm afraid, and we still are. So there was a lot of racial tension. Like I said, the city was basically shut down. I was driving to work. For some reason, I put the radio on and listened to the radio in the morning, and I was going from 79th and Lisbon, downtown Market Street, Market and Broadway, to work at Pabst. And I was saying, this is really weird, because I saw like one other car, so you know, and so not a bright guy it was. And so I'd come into the kind of the parking lot and say, put on the radio finally, you know, and well, you know, the race riots were yesterday. There was some looting and some demonstrations, kind of violent demonstrations, and the city's closed down. So there was no work. I think it was 2 days. So I went back home, you know. It was pretty concentrated in the downtown area and going to the near south side. We went through a difficult time. The whole country went through a difficult time. The whole civil rights movement in the middle 60s, and the acceptance of that, and you know, housing, segregation, and then you had the presidential elections of '68, and you had the assassinations then too. You know, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. That was a strife time. Vietnam War was big at the time too, so there was a lot of strife in this country at that time. Yeah.
You said that like the city was shut down. Do you remember when like the city had a curfew? Like, do you remember what that was like, just staying in your house the whole day?
Well, we didn't have any riots on the west side. Even the west side, even then, was pretty far away from the mainstream and downtown, and not where the people who were rioting the most part lived. So it was pretty much the same where I live, you know, 5 miles away from downtown. So it was, like I said, pretty concentrated in downtown, and business downtown, near south side, near east side. So it was a couple days. We weren't really directly involved. There weren't any demonstrations in our area, but it was intense downtown. And then, you know, for a couple days, like I said, the city was shut down. There was curfews. Yeah, you couldn't go anywhere, and kind of went with the flow and say, well, I hope this gets better, you know. And then you think, well, what can I do to make this better? And I think that got me involved in thinking about politics more and that stuff too.
Did you or anyone in your family ever get like involved with the civil rights movement?
Well, my dad certainly was, because of his position, labor leader. But I was on the fringes, and I would say I was never an activist or really actively involved, no.
Switch gears a little bit here. You said that throughout your childhood you were a big baseball fan.
Yep.
Do you remember watching the Braves?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And you know, baseball and football and basketball were always the major sports, like the king sports. I mean soccer and lacrosse, other things that are coming up, and volleyball, but they weren't big in my day. It was the meat and potato sports, you know. And so it was County Stadium before it became Miller Park. A long time there, it was built in the 50s. There was a lot of construction in the late 50s and early 60s going on, you know, all the roads. And that's why we're talking about all these problems today, because WPS, you know, works from the Roosevelt administration and all the stuff after World War II, the jobs. So much of our infrastructure and bridges and stuff were built. Our freeway system in the early 60s, and now everything is, we're having problems because everything is so old, okay? And then we got to go through this. It's a tough time now. But sports were always an outlet for all those kind of things, And so I was a big fan. I remember my dad taking me to County Stadium when I was 10 years old, and I was going to Packer games, okay? And we would go to the Braves. It was the Milwaukee Braves. In '57 was when they won the World Series, so this town went absolutely crazy. I mean, you see any town that wins the World Series, it just goes crazy. And if Milwaukee could win another one, it would be just great. But so we followed, and then when I went to school, it was hard because the Atlanta Braves took the Milwaukee Braves away from town, if you remember in the history, ever studied that. And so there was a number of years, and Bud Selig then brought back, and we became the Brewers in the early 70s then. And the Brewers haven't done that terribly well. The Packers had their heyday in the mid-'60s with Vince Lombardi. That was some good times, because the Packers had some lean years in the '50s. And they had some lean years after that, too. Now they're going backwards again, but they had some great years here, so we'll see what happens now. And then the Bucks were never much of a force when they had Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson in '71. They were world champs. They haven't done that since then. And like I said, we're big Marquette fans. In 1977, Marquette won the national championship. They won Marquette University, the only one they won. And I was there in Atlanta with my wife. She was pregnant with their first child, and that was a great happening. And there were a couple of Marquette High players on the Marquette basketball that were national champs: Gary Rosenberger and Bill Neary, kind of famous names that played at Marquette University besides Marquette High. Some teams Marquette High had in the '70s. You talk about 1971-72, my first year at Marquette High. I got into coaching basketball right away. I coached all through the '70s and '80s in basketball. I was the sophomore coach. And at the end, I was Paul Nowak's assistant for a few years. But that may be the best team in the state of Wisconsin. Again, prejudiced here, of course. But we had just a tremendous team. Jeff Jonas and Jimmy Smith. I remember all these: Felix Mantilla, Reggie Harris, and Wayne Heidenreich. Bill Neary was a sub. Gary Rosenberg was a sub. Those two guys would go on and play for Marquette University. It was just a great coming into Marquette first year and being a part of that and seeing them. And they had some great teams in the '70s and some great rivalries. There was some really good teams. Dominican, I didn't mention Dominican. Dominican had some terrific teams in the early '70s with Don Gaz, and Zager had some great teams at Don Bosco. Messmer had some very good teams. Pius always was our big rivals, like I said. So it was that Metro Conference. It was the Catholic Conference at that time. There was some great basketball in the '70s going into the '80s that I really had fun being part of.
Do you think that the environment of the basketball games and the sports in general here has changed? Because obviously, I don't think basketball is as big as it was back then. What were the games like? Well,
it was the place to be. And at college, I had the same experience. And of course, you're up there in the cold. You have much else to do. You wouldn't want to go out and support your teams. But I know I haven't been to many games now as I get older and I have grandkids and other things going on in my life besides Marquette High. Although I'm still involved in Marquette High, still on a couple of committees, the Hall of Fame Sports Committee and stuff like that. So I see good spirit here, and that I think there's we were more focused. I don't know if that's right, concentrated. We didn't have social media. People weren't on their phones 8 hours a day. We didn't have the computers. Our interests were more, again, like I said, going back to my childhood, our interests were the neighborhood and friendships and doing things there. In high school, our emphasis was, for a lot of people, was supporting your teams, supporting the school, and really was a big thing. Going to basketball game, Friday night, I'm going to the basketball game, or I'm going to the football game, okay? those two sports in particular were real big. It was just, I think we had less, what's the word I'm looking for here, like the external, we didn't have all the social media like that. I think that's a big thing. I know you can answer it better than me, but it was a thing to do, and it was very enjoyable. It was very community building. It was a lot of fun being at school.
You showed me the picture earlier of when you won the state tournament, and it was in the newspaper. Do you remember what that was like?
That was absolutely awesome. I think everybody should have a chance to be a champion or win a state championship. I hope everybody does it once. It's a neat feeling. I mean, like anything else. I mean, hopefully this project you work hard on, you get satisfaction from it. You put a lot of time. I've been on a lot of successful teams. Baseball, football, basketball, tennis. Yeah, our tennis program is off the charts, Marquette Highs, 12 of the last 13 years state champs or some ridiculous thing like that. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, soccer's been incredible too. And maybe basketball hasn't been quite as successful. Maybe that's why it's, maybe down a little bit. But I have a son now. I have two boys, 2 girls, and both our sons graduated from Marquette High. And right now, our oldest son is coaching sophomore basketball, Bill Schmitt. He was a very good player when he was here. He was captain of the team basketball and he graduated in '97. Okay, and so that kind of keeps me going. I'll come to more games now and stuff. But yeah, it still could be a lot of fun. Yeah.
When you went to school here, were you part of any clubs?
Yeah, I was sports editor of the newspaper. Surprise. We had a flambeau, and then they had the yearbook. I was more in the weekly thing. As a matter of fact, when we were juniors, there were about 5 or 6 of us. We put out a weekly paper, a little kind of a flambeau. It was a weekly thing. Hoi Polloi was called, the People. And so I kind of did the sports stuff. And we had one guy, Joe McBride, who was going to be a 65 famous journalist and writer. He's out in California. He was just a whiz, and Dan Melton. I mean, we had a couple of guys who really were smart, and and so literally we did it on one day. So we met after school. Maybe we got out 8 or 9 o'clock, so that paper would be ready for Friday. Everybody looked forward to getting this paper on Friday morning. We passed out the entire school. People loved it. It was all about the school. So what was going on, what happened the last couple of days, who we playing on Friday and Saturday, what went on in conclave was big, okay, something happened in the classes, kind of some news locally, but it was more concentrated again on the school, what was going on in the school. So we did that for a whole semester. We just got exhausted because I was hitchhiking home at 8, 9 o'clock at night on Thursday nights all the time because I was here. And then I was involved in conclave all through the years. And like I said, senior class president used to run the school dances, kind of the social activities. So I was always interested in doing that stuff. So, and I did, play sports for a couple of years, but then I mainly cheerleaded for sports after that, literally.
Was there like a cheerleading team here?
There certainly was, really? Yes. And I remember in 1965, the starting 5 on our freshman team in 1961, which went undefeated. The next freshman team went undefeated was a team I coached in 98. But the starting 5 was Joe Larkin and Jerry Bell were the guards. Chuck Nagel, who went on to have a terrific career at Wisconsin, and Bill Nagel were the forwards, and Reb Holtz. Reb Holtz was the center. Those 5 guys were the starting 5 in '65. They were all seniors, and they won the state championship. And I was a cheerleader. And so we actually did, and we played at the arena, the state championship game. And so we actually worked these things. So we actually did flips and stuff. You still have the victory pyramid. I mean, we used to have the pyramid, the guy on the top or something. I was the second one, the guy stood on me. And then we actually did, we'd be on our back like this, and the guys would come and do flips. So we actually worked on that stuff. We weren't gymnasts. I was never very coordinated or a great athlete. That's why I got cut from all the sports. But enjoyed the cerebral part of the game and stuff. And So we really worked at it. It was emphasized. In college, I was the mascot. You know, I it was a goat, and just like the Hilltoppers a little bit. And I actually was in the uniform and would do that kind of stuff. So that was always goofy. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
We'll probably take a break.
Okay.
So after high school, you attended St. Thomas and UW-Madison to earn a degree in political science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, undergrad and graduate degrees in political science. Yeah.
Okay. During college, you said that the draft lottery was going on for Vietnam. Do you remember what that experience was like?
I sure do. Yeah, actually, it was 69, 70. It was 70, and I just graduated from St. Thomas. I got accepted in graduate school in political science in Madison, and I was a house fellow, a dorm prefect, so I was getting my grad degree for free, so it was awesome. It was really good. And I enjoyed being at all 4 years in the dorm I had. And it was an unbelievable experience because, you know, you talk about riots and disruptions. So the Vietnam War, Nixon was the president, okay, and he had just, quotes, shortened the war by widening the war going into Laos and Cambodia right next to Vietnam together. There were riots all around the country, okay? The country is really split over Vietnam. And in college campuses, of course, the radicals, I mean, everybody was against the war. Actually, the second semester of my first year, I spent a semester and a summer in graduate school, and but it got so bad, the National Guard was on campus in the second semester. Classes were shut down. No one went to class the second semester. Well, the only people going to class were the law students and the graduate students. I was going to class. I mean, it was, you know, I believe in some of the things. The war was a mistake, you know, as it proved to be, but you wanted to respect the people who were fighting it. They're Americans. They're our brothers, okay? And but Madison was a very radical campus. It was called the one out west, the Berkeley. Berkeley was always known as the most radical campus in the country. We were called the Berkeley of the Midwest, which was a lot of truth. Like I said, there was patrols out, there were curfews. You know, we talked about that before, and it was just an unbelievable environment to be in. But I was focused on, as law students were, and almost all the graduate students were going to class. I mean, this was their careers now. You know, it wasn't like you were a freshman, sophomore, and you know, trying to find out what you're going to do. I mean, you had made a kind of a career choice, and you know, you had to go to class. You had to do the work, and I did. So I was sympathetic to it, but at the same time, I said, you know, yeah, it's great. I can protest stuff, but I'm going to class. I got tear gassed out of a class once. It was just incredible. They were in riot shields. You never saw the, you know, troops in riot shields. You know, the big shield in front of you, and the gun, and the helmet, and all this kind of stuff. And I know Bascom Hill is famous in Madison, and then down in State, they were all lined up. I know about 100 of them or something like this. And somebody threw a rock, of course, inevitably. There were thousands of students. We had all the graduate students. We had come out of North Hall, which is on the hill there too, in the political science area. So go down kind of the bottom of the hill, and all of a sudden, you know, they're shooting tear gas canisters out of their guns, and you know, it's like the irony was like, and then especially there was a couple of major student groups. The Weathermen were very famous. They're more radicals, but then so they'd be in like, you know, army garb. You know, they'd be in their green, and they had their canteens, and this is the irony of it. They're against the war, and they're dressed like it. And then they would say, "Did you get hit? You got contacts?" And they have directions how to wash out your eyes and stuff. So, but that was a tumultuous year there, and so it was quite an experience to live through. That was pretty amazing. I had a couple of radical students in my dorm like I lived, but then they said, we're not going anymore because now the cops are using CS gas, which is very searing. You could really get hurt with that stuff because they were getting tired of getting, you know, rocks and stuff thrown at their cop cars and stuff like this. And the National Guard was on campus, like I said, and it was quite an experience.
So would you say after like that happened, the protests kind of like died down, or do you think they stayed?
Yeah, yeah, and then people's, you know, the war wound down. Johnson became president. Okay, well, and he didn't run because of the Vietnam War, and then Nixon got elected. Okay, and it was just, you know, you could just go so long. You can't take off 2 years from school, for example, or more than one semester, and then people started to realize, and the government came on and started admitting finally, you know, their Pentagon Papers and things like that. Yeah, they made some mistakes. They didn't tell us exactly what was going on, and that so that got you know, became less of an issue, and we lived through it. And there's still scars of Vietnam. I had friends go to Vietnam, and see, I didn't get in because when I was in graduate school, like I said, and they had, because they widened the war, which is very unpopular. They had to say, okay, we're going to have to get more people, okay, more troops. So we had a lottery in '70, okay, and it was like the ping pong lottery balls, you know, you played. So you put the balls, so everybody's birthday then. So mine's May 23rd. So so they picked up balls one by one, and so number one was January 2nd, etc. Okay, so up to, you know, 350, whatever it is, right? And so I was like 230, and they said, unless you're below 100 or below 75 particular, you're not going. So so I got into lottery with thousands of other people my age, okay, and if you're unlucky, you were going to Vietnam, okay, and if not, you were not. And so that's the end of that story. Yeah. I got a high number.
After college, you said you taught at Illinois for like an internship, and then you worked at Marquette. What was it like teaching at Marquette?
Well, when I guess when I went to political science, and my first day I was a house fellow, I went to a long class, a couple long classes. Usually you're in seminars for 3 hours, and we just discussed this party responsibility theory by Schatzschneider, and I had learned about that in college. My grades were, you know, pretty good, 3-point kind of stuff, but I mean, there were really some smart people in graduate school, and they were dissecting this. We just talked about stuff for 3 hours, and then we all went to the room, and they started talking about this again. I said, we just talked about this. I said, I'm going back to my dorm, you know. I walked, and some guys were throwing the football around. They said, hey, Luigi, you know me, and he said, you want to throw? I said, yeah, I'll throw the football around. So I think my fate was from almost the very beginning. I don't know if I realized it that day. I kind of did already. I said, I'm not going on for a PhD. Academia, the life of academia is not for me. Okay, I'm interested in learning more, but I want to do more than that, you know. And I want to enjoy, you know, and being with people, not just books. And and being a house fellow kind of fit into that. And then I got my degree, but then and then I said, well, I guess I'm going to teach, okay, because I enjoyed being with the students, so that really set off. They were in my room all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so I applied. I went for a semester taking education credits after my grad degree, and then they said, well, you know, we'll put you in a fast-tracked in an intern teaching program. And just like I said, the Madison students were considered so radical. No Wisconsin high school would take intern teachers from Madison because we had that, you know, that terrible reputation. We don't want, you know, these radical, long-haired kids coming to our schools and infecting our students. So we had the intern program, a major one, a couple in Illinois. One was in Downers Grove, Illinois. And so I got placed in Downers Grove, Illinois. With a couple other students. I lived with an elderly lady, you know, in her basement or whatever. And then I got hired to teach summer school there. And then Father Shinners, who was my predecessor when I became alumni director in the mid-'80s at Marquette High, called me. We were still good friends, and he said, hey, there's an opening at Marquette High. in political science. Foreign relations was the class basically, and I had just taught part of that in this seminar I was teaching at Downers Grove High School, Downers Grove North High School, and I said, oh, okay, yeah, great. So I came for an interview. I was having an interview in a couple places in Illinois, and I was out in Merrill. I knew so many of the Jesuits, when I came and interviewed, and it was like, it looked like I had the job right away, And then, someone said, oh, they were like talking to me like I had the job already, I was supposed to go to Merrill, Wisconsin, have an interview later in the day, and I didn't even make it. I had to call them and say, well, I can't make it, I said, I hope I didn't put you out. And they said, well, the superintendent of schools and this, and I'm like, oh, okay. I said, I better take this job. So I said, do I have this job? And Father Schlemmer was the principal, so he hired me before, and he said, yeah. So I didn't even ask how much. I think we were making $5,600 a year, or $7,000 a year. That's what it was in 1971. Okay, so money, I didn't care. I wasn't married yet. Got married the next year, but then I started thinking a little more about money. But in those days, $7,000-8,000 wasn't too bad. And you had insurance and stuff like that. But so I think how God works in strange ways. I think there was kind of a destiny here. I had very good memories of Marquette High. I like school settings. I had a very fun, successful college career. I like graduate school. And then so it was kind of a natural. If you're going to come back, if you had some, well, where would you most like to teach? Well, Marquette High. And then I was here for 28 plus years.
Were there any noticeable changes that, from when you were a teacher, that changed from when you were a student?
I don't think that. I think there was a lot of changes from 1971 to left in 1999. I think the 70s and 80s and 90s are all very different from each other. It wasn't that far out of school, so I would say the early 70s and stuff, it's like the school is like I remembered it. I was gone for 6 years. So I graduated in 65, and in 71 I was back at Marquette High, so that wasn't much of a gap, really. There's a lot socially that had went on, but Marquette High was Marquette High. So I was pretty comfortable with that, and believed in the mission, etc. So not so much, but I just think, I talked about today, how many Jesuits you have, a handful of Jesuits, okay? Larry Seward was our first lay principal, so it was always Jesuits. We were filled with Jesuits, and there was 15-20% lay and 80% Jesuit when I started here in the 50s and 60s, and then gradually, year by year, and then the decades change. You had these dramatic changes, so that was significant because now lay people were taking over more and more. It wasn't just the Jesuits. So that was a gradual transformation, and it was kind of a hard transformation. I remember in the early 80s, some controversy. And then there was a major talk about some of the leaders wanted Marquette High to go co-ed. That was a big thing. I was on the non-co-ed side. I just thought that we'd lose our uniqueness, and we are unique because we're all boys. Now, is that the best for everybody? Well, probably not, okay? But we talk about choices in life, talk about choices in education, that's still big to talk about, where you want to go to school. Well, you don't have to go to all-boys school if you don't like it, And there's some real benefits from single-sex education. I always believed in, and data will show that, actually more dramatically for girls than boys. I guess if I had to think of the ideal high school, I would say single-sex, freshman and sophomore, definitely, okay? Junior and senior co-ed. People can handle it better. There's a lot of difference between, think of yourself, 13-year-old versus 18-year-old. They're a little different, aren't you? Yeah, in a lot of ways, all ways probably. And and growing up and your own confidence and stuff like that. And it's great for people to do everything. And like I said, particularly for girls. I had 2 girls, and they went to DSHA, and they did everything. They were the sports writers. They were the players. Not just cheerleaders. And I think it's a great opportunity. So that was a big controversy. And of course, most of the alumni wanted us to stay all boys. I mean, there was that real tradition, and it's kind of counterculture a little bit, saying single sex. You got Title 19. That's what made it go in all the colleges. You got the middle 70s and stuff, and Notre Dame went co-ed, and say, oh my God, if Notre Dame goes co-ed, I guess we're all going co-ed, which is basically true. But it's because of Title 19 and funding in sports and stuff like that too. And Thomas More, it was called Don Bosco when I went to school. Don Bosco became Thomas More, basically. They started in 12th and Wind Lake, in the area on the south side, St. Francis. And Thomas More became co-ed. Well, it closed St. Mary's. St. Mary's was a big girls' school in the 60s and 70s on the south side of town. They're a very big school. Well, they closed. And I did argue, which I think is true. I said, you make Marquette High co-ed, it's going to close the SHA. Now, I don't know if that had been true or not, but I think it would have hurt the SHA. And like I said, I think it's great to have choices, and I think a lot of guys thrive in single sex where they wouldn't have in a co-ed school, and I think that's particularly true for girls. So I'm a big single sex guy yet, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't prepare you as much. I mean, it's becoming, we talk about, societal change, women in society and women working, and stuff that I wasn't familiar with in the 50s and 60s. It's so different now, and it's the way it should be, of course. And so you should be able to have differences in education too, I think.
So you worked here until 1999,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're currently serving your 7th term?
I guess it's, I don't know how this part-time job became a full-time career, kind of. I never thought it'd be a career, but it certainly has become one, yeah.
So you got elected in a special election in '98?
November of '98, yeah.
What was that like getting elected?
That's something everybody should have to go through, too. I think one of the hardest things you can do in life is run for a political office, especially at a local level, because you don't have radio and TV money, and so what do? You go door to door. And for example, I represent about 54,000 constituents. The big majority of my constituents are Wauwatosa, where I live. I lived all these 40-some years. But their neighborhoods like Washington Highlands, and Gillies, Blue Mound area, and then I'm more on North Avenue, on the north side, 88th Street. So it's a big area. So you got to walk that, and so you get papers. They're professional people, or you get from your city hall, and neighborhoods and blocks and this stuff, and you have papers, and then you see. You can't go to every place. That's ridiculous. I walked my district about 3 times. Well over 700 hours to walk a district. That's hard work. And when I ran the first time, there was two other people I was running against. One was kind of conservative, one was very liberal. I was kind of in the middle. I always kind of been. But you had to work, and then you had to raise money, which is never easy. So Marquette High was a big asset for me. So I went to my alumni directory and I talked to the people, of course. And irony was, of course, I had done this stuff, and I wrote to my top 900 friends, okay, and just said, hey, this is your old pal Luigi, I'm running for office, and I just say I feel calling to run here, and I'd like to try this, and if you can help me out, I'd much appreciate it. So you didn't hold a gun to anybody's head, and I really raised some nice money, and it allowed you, when you go, if you don't have materials to drop off to someone when you go to someone's house, I mean, you've wasted your time. You knocked on the door, they're not there. I mean, you got to leave some information. So that is really hard work. It's much harder running for office than being in office. Because I'd leave Marquette High at 3, 4 o'clock, and then I'd go out and work till 7, 8 o'clock at night, and then my wife would, I'd take maybe a sandwich or something, and then I'd come home and work with my campaign manager and have a glass of wine. I started drinking wine then after a long day and night. But then I took a leave of absence when I won the primary, and I was in the finals. And then I won that special election, did very well. And Marquette High said, well, can you still take one government class, teach a government class in the morning? I said, yeah, okay. And but that thing, I was very involved. Wauwatosa is a very active area. There was this county grounds issues, which are still going on. It's really big. And so I just said I couldn't do it after a while. I start missing classes and stuff. So I ended my almost 30-year association of Marquette High then, but I still stayed in a couple committees and stuff like that. But it's considered a part-time job, but it's like anything else. How hard do you work at something? And I have a very active area. Wauwatosa is one of the best voting of all the 19 municipalities that make up Milwaukee County. And I've had some good positions. I'm chairman of finance now, which is the budget committee, which is always the most important body in the legislature. And so so you get involved, and if you take it seriously, and I have really been very blessed because I've had an opportunity, and my wife has been absolutely wonderful, of course, and that is it allowed me to do, Marquette High was an avocation and a vocation. You understand that. So is politics. So I've had two wonderful careers to do what I wanted to do. And I was alumni director for a number of years, and that's very much constituency services. You're serving the alumni. And a big part, and best part I like about being an elected official is constituency services are real important. It's important if you want to get reelected to be practical about it, but I like doing that. I was a natural at that. And so I write letters to people every week, because I get the newspaper and people are doing stuff, and high school students I like to write to, you did well, especially my area, Wauwatosa, and I'll write to Marquette High students and stuff like that too, that I know, or because I have my association with them. So yeah, that's been, it's neat to be able to do what you really wanted to do. So I am just, and grow up in a great community. Milwaukee has warts. It's changed dramatically in my lifetime. But I've been 8 decades here in Milwaukee, and I was gone for 6 years, but I wasn't gone very far. I was in St. Paul, and I was in Madison. And I was, a semester and a summer teaching in Downers Grove, Illinois, which was close to Milwaukee. So Milwaukee is a great community. It's got diversity. It's got its problems. Who doesn't? But great institutions here. There's a lot, and it's a little city, in the sense, I wouldn't like to live in New York or San Francisco. So Midwestern values. There's a difference between East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. There is. And when you travel more, you'll see that, I think. And I think Midwest has got the best virtues, character, great place to raise a family, and be able to do what you want to do, I think, and not have to be something for somebody else, So, you're looking at the luckiest guy around, because I've had a chance to have 2 careers, which were vocations and avocations. Well, how wonderful is that? And then have a wonderful wife, and who's supported me on all this, because when I was alumni director, man, I was gone a lot. I had weekends, running reunions. I had 12 major reunions to run during the year. And politics, you get involved in night meetings and stuff, and it could be pretty long hours in that once in a while too. And less now. I'm getting older, as you can see, so I'm winding down finally. So this could maybe be my last run. I'm elected till April of 2020. So we used to have 4-year terms. Now the last couple elections have been 2 years. In 2016 started 2, so I got elected for 2 years in 2016. I just got elected in April of this year, 2018, for 2 years. But my wife's been retired for 4 years, so maybe it's time to hang it up in April 2020. But don't tell anybody, okay? But I will, next year in Christmas time, I'll announce if anybody else wants to run, give them plenty of notice and stuff like that. And probably I do. I've done coaching all my years. I was just finished 24 years of coaching at Marquette High, the varsity reserve, and I coached golf at the SHA, coached my kids. So I'm still been coaching my whole tenure here too.
You said it was kind of crazy how this part-time job in government turned out to be a full career for you.
Yeah.
What led you to run run for office? Well,
I was always interested. I know that. I think because I ran for offices in high school and college, and always wanted to be a leader of an organization. It was just kind of my blood, I guess, a little bit. And I enjoyed doing it. And fairly successful at it. And I was happy at Market High, okay, but, and you'll find this too, Market High is absolutely wonderful, but you know, there's life outside of Market High too. There's life outside of academia, and I think I realized that, you know. And then I changed. I went back in the classroom after I was 12 years the alumni director, and the position became up in Wauwatosa, and I was on a committee in Wauwatosa, so I was kind of, you know, itchy that way a little bit. And then my wife, when we got married, she knew I was in certain politics. She said, I want you to promise me you'll never run for office, because I know that's in your blood. She says, I don't like it, you know, it's the ethics, you know, it's such a terrible life for a family, because you're in politics, no matter what you do, there's people that are not going to like you, okay? It's not like being at Market High, pretty much everybody's on the same page, you know, and teachers are pretty well respected, you know, and liked for the most part, I think, huh? And that's not so much in politics, although I have a very faithful constituency, but that's because a lot of them were, when I would go out and do these doors, for example, inevitably I'd run into someone from Market High. You're out there for 6, 7 hours and you run into people that you know. And so that was a big plus, big plus for me. But then she said, well, you've been there and done that. I taught full-time for 14 years. Then I was alumni full-time for 10 years. Then Bob Brzezinski, a name from the past, died. He was a great baseball coach too. And they said, and I had taught government all these years in the 70s, going to the 80s too, besides foreign relations. Those are my two big classes. And they said, well, would you teach a couple classes in government? So I said, well, yeah, I guess you want me to. And besides keeping the alumni job. And then we had a new president come in, Doug Lenhardt, I knew. I went back into the classroom. No one lasts in those jobs forever. And it's a good thing probably too. And so I was interested, and my wife looked at me and said, you really want to do this, don't you? I said, yeah. And she said, well, you've been there and done that. I gave a lot of my youth and cared about Market High. I did maybe all I could accomplish, whatever that was at Market High. I was ready to do something else. And I'll tell you the easy summary of this. One of the toughest days of my life was leaving Market High. One of the best days of my life was leaving Market High, because I had a new opportunity. It was a wider, a bigger constituency now. You know, I was like a big deal. I'm like a congressman or something like that. But yeah, it appealed to me, and it's been a very good run.
What are some of the day-to-day duties of your job now?
It depends a little bit about the time of the year. You're always busiest, any legislative branch is always busiest during budget time. The most important thing of every legislative branch is doing a budget every year. So you think of your family, or, you know, your dad, your mom, and they got to figure out a budget every year, and they got to pay their taxes at the end of the year and stuff like that. And so it's, to make it kind of simple, and it isn't much more complicated than that, although it's difficult, is that you have a certain amount of money, and you have to decide how you prioritize it. And there's never enough money. Okay, so well, instead of 2 weeks, you know, to California or something, well, maybe you only can do a week, okay, or maybe I can't go to this private college. I'm going to have to go to the public college if I don't get the money I want, you know. So and that's kind of in a nutshell what government is. I mean, you got to decide priorities and try to be fair to everyone, and especially your constituents that you represent. So. And like anything else, you can get as busy as you want. I think particularly in politics. So you can kind of go along, or you can get involved. I was involved in my community a little bit before I got elected. You get much more involved once you're elected, because I represent the great majority of Wauwatosa. And so you've got a committee cycle every month, okay, and then you can be on some special committees. You've got constituency services that kind of ongoing. So you can be as busy as you want. You can work 40 hours a week, you can work 25 hours a week. It depends how involved your constituents are also. And I've been more involved and a little more active and put a little more time in than probably the average supervisor, because I have a very active constituency. You know, they follow the budget and they call you, and, you know, well, a little bit less now it seems, because they know me after all these many, many years. I think it's like anything else. It's what you make of it. So it's uneven. It really is for most people, and for me now too. I don't go to as many events. I don't push myself as much as I did. I don't have to be at everything. Sometimes, you know, I would say, unlike some of my colleagues, like African American supervisors, they have to push for their community maybe a little bit more. They're looked upon as leaders. I mean, we've got the mayor and other people, influential civic leaders. I don't have to be in the forefront all the time in a community like Wauwatosa, for example. So.
Obviously, it seems like you really enjoyed being the Milwaukee County Supervisor.
Yep.
What would you say your favorite thing about being it is?
Well, I think my favorite thing is constituency services. It's something I like at, it's something I'm good at, and it is getting legislation passed that improves or helps your community too. You are in to help your community as well, but you have to take the greater good of Milwaukee County, and you know, you're not just voting for your community all the time. But I would say I have a very good reputation, and I've got to know so many people, and there are thanks once in a while, though great majority of the time people call you not because they're endeared to you, it's because, what the hell are you doing, Luigi? You know, what did you vote for that for? You know, I said, well, I thought it was the best thing to do. Well, they don't agree, of course. You know, no one agrees, okay, all the time. I mean, does anybody agree all the time on anything? In politics, that's really, you know, the max 10 on that stuff. So, so you live with that, but you get satisfied when you can do stuff, when you can answer. You know, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you who can answer your question. So I'm good at that. I don't try to know everything. I don't know everything, but I'll help them make sure they get answers. Okay, you go talk to them. You know, if you don't know the answer, you come back, and they're rarely they have to call back. But I've gotten to know a lot of people in different parts of the community. You know, if it's transportation, talk about it's housing. You know, I know where to send people. If you got a parks problem, you know, in your park here, you talk to these people, and I try to advocate for them, of course. And then if you can't advocate them, there's a lot of satisfaction too. I got a project through that took me 5 years to work on, Menominee River Parkway projects, 4.9 miles. It was $10 million. We have a beautiful system of parks and parkways, particularly in Milwaukee County. One of the best ones is Menominee River Parkway. We have 3 parkways in Wauwatosa, as a matter of fact. And that was a lot of money. When you get about a $30 million budget for parks a year, and one year I got $10 million. That was a couple years ago. And we had to do some extra things, and how people enjoy that, and you know, and you hear they said, oh, this was a great thing, and I had an important role in that because I had to advocate for it, get money, you know, pre-budgeting, you get engineering, then you got to get to the full money, and you got to get all your colleagues to say, yeah, this is a priority, and they have their own issues and their own parkways. So you fight for that, and so I've done some. Hoyt Pool was a very good success. I was really worked on that. We got the bridge done, and we got lighting along Honey Creek. So, you know, I've done some, there were necessary things to do. But people had to wait their turn, too. It took, like I said, 5 years to do this project, Menominee River Parkway. And so those are the good things. And then you go to Eagle Scout things, you go to some civic things where you can say nice things and feel good about the community, which I do. Wauwatosa is a great community. Milwaukee County is a great area, like I said. So it kind of balances a little bit the hard times when there's there've been pension problems in Milwaukee County. There's always issues. This budget was very contentious, but a couple years before we had a very contentious budget, and you know, that's not a lot of fun, taking calls and taking a lot of flack. Some deserved and a lot undeserved. Sometimes, you know, people are just mad, so they take it out on their local politician, you know. But that's the way it is. You got to be able to do that. But the pluses outweigh the minuses, or you wouldn't stay in. Yeah.
All right. I think that should just about wrap it up. Thank you for coming.
Good. I enjoyed doing it.